You want to improve your English, but you have one problem that quietly destroys your progress. You are completely alone. No teacher, no practice partner, no immersive environment. You think this is a disadvantage? Today, I am going to show you why learning English alone is actually your absolute greatest advantage, if you have the right system. You are not lazy. You are not stupid. And you are definitely not incapable of learning English. But something is not working. You sit down. You open a video. You tell yourself, today I'm going to improve. And for a moment it feels productive. You watch. You listen. You understand most of it. Maybe you even feel a small sense of progress. But then reality shows up. You try to speak, and everything collapses. Your mind slows down. Your thoughts become unclear. You start translating word by word, and before the sentence even forms, you stop. Silence. Let me ask you something. How many times has that happened? You understand English, but you cannot use it. And that gap, that invisible space between understanding and speaking, is where most people get stuck for years. Not because they lack knowledge, but because they built the wrong system. Think about your typical day. You wake up, you check your phone, maybe just for a minute, but that minute turns into 10. 10 turns into 20. Your brain is already scattered before the day even begins. Later, you decide to study English. You open YouTube. Search. Improve your English fast. You watch one video. Then another. Then another. It feels like learning. But deep down you know something is off. Because at the end of it all, you still haven't spoken a single sentence out loud. Not one. And this is where it becomes dangerous. You start telling yourself a quiet lie. I'll speak when I have someone practice with. I just need a partner. I need a better environment. I need more confidence. So you wait. Days pass. Weeks pass. Months pass. And your English stays exactly the same. Not because you didn't try, but because your effort was scattered. Let me show you a small scene. You're sitting in your room, alone. You think, maybe I should practice speaking. But then another thought comes in. It's weird to talk to myself. So instead you go back to watching videos. Safer, easier, comfortable. No risk, no embarrassment, but also no growth. Think about that. You are waiting for the perfect condition to begin. A partner, a teacher, a class, an environment. But what if that condition never comes? Or worse, what if it comes and you're still not ready? Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Speaking is not something you activate in public. It is something you build in private, quietly, repetitively, almost invisibly. But modern learning has trained you to do the opposite. Consume more, prepare more, delay action. And the more you consume, the more overwhelmed you feel. Your brain is full, but your ability is empty. This is cognitive overload. Too much input, not enough output. Too much thinking, not enough doing. And your brain begins to resist. You feel tired faster, distracted more easily, less willing to take action. So you escape, you scroll, you watch, you delay, not because you don't care, but because your system is broken. Let me ask you another question. Are you actually learning English, or are you just watching other people talk about it? There's a difference, a big one, and most people never notice it. They confuse exposure with progress. They think, if I understand, I'm improving. But understanding is passive. Fluency is active. Understanding feels safe. Fluency feels uncomfortable, and your brain will always choose safety. unless you train it otherwise. This is why being alone feels like a disadvantage. Because there is no pressure, no accountability, no external push. So you drift, you delay, you tell yourself, I'll start seriously tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose momentum. Not dramatically, but quietly. And that quiet loss is the most dangerous kind. Because you don't panic. You just stay the same, year after year. Now here's the part most people don't expect. The problem is not that you are alone. The problem is that you don't know how to use that solitude. Because if you understood how to structure it, if you knew how to turn isolation into a training environment, if you stopped depending on external conditions, you wouldn't feel stuck. You would feel in control. And control changes everything. But before we get there, we need to confront a deeper truth. Because what's holding you back is not just your situation. It's a belief. A belief so common that almost nobody questions it. And once you see it, clearly you won't be able to unsee it. The real problem is not your environment. It's not your lack of partner. It's not your schedule. It's not even your confidence. The real problem is what you believe about fluency. You've been trained to think that language is social, that you need conversation to improve, that speaking comes from interaction, that without people progress is limited. It sounds logical, but it's incomplete, and that incompleteness is what keeps you stuck. Let's slow this down. Fluency is not a performance skill. It is a neurological pattern. Think about that. When you speak your native language, you are not thinking about grammar. You are not translating. You are not searching. You are recognizing patterns instantly. Words connect automatically. Sentences form without effort. That's not talent. That's conditioning. Years of repetition wired into your brain. Now compare that to how you are learning English. You consume content. You understand explanations. You collect vocabulary, but you rarely repeat. You rarely produce. And most importantly, you rarely struggle in the right way. So your brain never builds a pattern. It only stores information. And information is not fluency. Let me make this clearer. There are two completely different processes happening in your brain. One is recognition. The other is recall. Recognition is easy. You see a word and you understand it. Your brain says, I know this. It feels like progress. But recall? Recall is different. Recall is when there is no support, no subtitles, no multiple choice, no hints, just you and silence. And your brain has to produce something from nothing. That's hard. That's uncomfortable. And that's exactly where fluency is built. But most people avoid that space. They stay in recognition because it feels good. It feels safe. It feels like learning. But it's an illusion. And this is where neuroscience becomes important. Your brain is constantly optimizing for efficiency. It wants to save energy. It wants quick rewards. So when you watch a video and understand it, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. You feel satisfied, even though you didn't actually build a skill. This is called false progress feedback. You feel like you're improving, but your output ability stays the same. Over time, this creates something even worse. Dopamine desensitization. The more you consume easy content, the less motivated you feel to do hard work. Speaking feels heavier. Writing feels slower. Practicing feels uncomfortable. So you avoid it. And instead you go back to what feels easy. More videos, more input, more passive learning. Let me show you another scene. You sit down to practice speaking. You open your mouth, and within seconds your brain resists. You feel tension. You feel awkward. You don't know what to say. So you stop, and you tell yourself, I need more preparation. So you go back to studying. But that's not preparation. That's avoidance. Think about that. The very activity that would build your fluency is the one you keep escaping from, not because you are weak, but because your brain has been trained to avoid cognitive strain. And this is where waiting for a partner becomes dangerous, because it gives you a perfect excuse. I can't practice right now. I need someone. I'll do it later. So you delay the hardest part indefinitely. And while you wait, nothing changes. Because fluency is not built in conversation. It is revealed in conversation. It is built before that, in silence, in repetition, in discomfort. This is what most people never understand. They think conversation creates fluency. But conversation only exposes what you've already trained. If the pattern is not built, no partner can save you. Let me ask you something. If someone forced you to speak English right now for 5 minutes straight, could you do it? Not perfectly, just continuously. Or would your mind freeze after a few sentences? That answer tells you everything. Because fluency is not about knowing more. It's about accessing what you already know without hesitation. And that only comes from one thing: repeated, deliberate output. Not once a week. Not when you feel ready. But daily, consistently, almost mechanically. And here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking, who can I practice with? Start asking, how can I train my brain every single day? Because the moment you take control of that process, everything changes. You stop waiting. You stop depending. You stop negotiating with your own excuses. And you start building something real. Quietly, systematically, without permission. But to truly understand how powerful this can be, we need to look at how high performers operate. Because the people who master difficult skills don't rely on ideal conditions. They build systems. And those systems work even when no one is watching. There's a pattern you will notice once you stop looking at average behavior. The people who master difficult skills do not rely on ideal conditions. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't wait for support. They don't wait for the perfect environment. They build systems in silence. Let me give you a different image. Not a classroom, not a group discussion, not a language exchange. A room, quiet, minimal, almost boring. One person, repeating the same phrases, again and again and again. No applause, no feedback, no audience, just repetition. This is where real skill is built. And most people never stay here long enough because it feels invisible. It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't give instant results. So they leave. But high performers, they stay. Think about elite athletes. Before the competition, before the crowd, before the spotlight, there are thousands of hours no one sees. The same movement, repeated, corrected, refined, repeated again. Not because it's fun, but because it works. Language is no different. Let me bring this closer to your world. There was a man, mid-30s, full-time job, no time, no partner. Every excuse you can think of, he had it. He didn't travel abroad. He didn't join expensive classes. He didn't surround himself with English speakers. He had one thing, a decision. Every morning before work, he sat in the same chair, same place, same time, and he spoke out loud. At first it was painful, broken sentences, long pauses, constant mistakes. If someone had listened, it would have sounded awkward. But no one was listening. And that changed everything. Because there was no judgment, he didn't stop. 10 minutes became 15. 15 became 20. Every single day. Then he added something simple. At night, he would write a few lines. Nothing perfect, just thoughts. Then he would read them out loud, again and again, until the sentences felt natural. No teacher, no partner, just repetition. Weeks passed. Nothing dramatic happened. No breakthrough moment. No sudden fluency. Just small, almost invisible improvements. His pauses became shorter. His sentences became smoother. His confidence slightly stronger. And this is where most people quit, because the progress is too slow to impress the ego. But he didn't quit. He trusted the process. Months later, something changed. Not externally, internally. He no longer needed to translate everything. Words started connecting faster. Not perfectly, but faster. And that speed is the beginning of fluency. Eventually, he started speaking with others. And here's the surprising part. He wasn't starting from zero. He was revealing what he had already built. Think about that. While others were waiting for practice, he was preparing for it. While others were consuming content, he was training output. While others were dependent, he was independent. And the result? When the opportunity finally came, he was ready. This is the difference. High performers don't wait for the environment. They create one. They don't ask, who will help me practice? They ask, how do I remove friction and repeat daily? Because they understand something most people ignore. Skill is not built in intensity. It is built in consistency. Not one long session, but many small ones. Not motivation, but structure. Not excitement, but discipline. Let me ask you something. If no one ever watched you, if no one ever praised you, if no one even knew you were learning, would you still practice? Or would you stop? That question reveals everything. Because learning alone is not a disadvantage. It is a filter. It removes people who rely on validation. It exposes those who lack structure. And it rewards those who can operate without being seen. This is why solitude, when used correctly, becomes an advantage. No distractions. No comparison. No pressure. Just you and the process. And when you learn to operate in that space, you don't just build language skills. You build control. But here's the problem. Most people are not controlled by their goals. They are controlled by something else. Something subtle. Something automatic. Something they don't even notice. A system running in the background, guiding their actions, shaping their habits, keeping them stuck. And if you don't see this system, clearly you will keep repeating the same cycle no matter how motivated you feel today. There's a system running your life right now. You don't see it. You didn't design it. But it is shaping your behavior every single day. And until you understand it, you will keep repeating the same patterns. Not because you choose to, but because you are conditioned to. Let's break it down simply. Every habit you have follows a loop: trigger, craving, response, reward, again and again and again. This is not theory. This is how your brain automates behavior to save energy. And right now, this loop is working against you. Let me show you how. You finish work. You feel tired. That's the trigger. Your brain looks for relief. That's the craving. Something easy. Something familiar. Something that doesn't require effort. So what do? You pick up your phone. You scroll. You watch something. That's the response. And for a moment, you feel better. That's the reward. Your brain relaxes. Dopamine releases. Tension drops. Loop complete. Now here's where it becomes dangerous. Your brain remembers this pattern. So the next time you feel tired, it doesn't ask, "Should I practice English?" It says, "Let's do what worked last time." Scroll. Watch. Escape. And just like that, your intention disappears. Not because you're weak, but because your system is stronger than your intention. Think about your learning habit. When do you usually plan to study English? At night, after work, when you are already mentally drained. That's a losing position, because in that state, your brain will always choose comfort over effort. So even if you start, you won't last. You open a lesson. 2 minutes later, you feel resistance. You don't understand everything. It feels slow. It feels hard. So your brain searches for relief. And without even thinking, you switch. Maybe just check one message, one notification, one video, and suddenly 30 minutes are gone. Let me ask you something. How many times has that happened without you even noticing? This is not a discipline problem. This is a system problem. Because your environment is constantly feeding the wrong loop. Your phone is not neutral. It is engineered to capture your attention, to give you fast rewards, to keep you engaged, to make effort feel unnecessary. So when you sit down to do something hard like speaking English, your brain compares it to an easier alternative, and you lose. Every time, unless you change the system. Let's go deeper. Your brain does not care about your long-term goals. It cares about immediate rewards. So if English practice feels slow, uncertain, uncomfortable, and scrolling feels fast, predictable, pleasurable, the decision is already made before you even realize it. This is why motivation doesn't work. Because motivation is emotional, and your system is biological. Emotion fades. Systems repeat. So the question is not, how do I feel more motivated? The real question is, what system is guiding my behavior right now? Because whatever that system is, it will decide your future. Let me show you another small scene. You sit down. You tell yourself, okay, 10 minutes of speaking. You start. I am going to pause. Silence. Your brain struggles. It feels slow, uncomfortable, exposed. And right there, your system activates. It whispers, "This is hard. Let's do something easier." And if you haven't trained your response, you obey. You stop, you escape, and the loop continues. But here's what most people never realize. Every time you escape, you reinforce the habit. You train your brain to avoid difficulty. You make it harder to try again next time. And slowly you become someone who avoids effort, not consciously, but automatically. This is how people stay stuck for years. Not because they don't want to improve, but because their daily loops are misaligned. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine you change just one thing. The trigger stays the same. You feel tired, but instead of reaching for your phone, you have a different response. You stand up, you walk to a specific place, a place that only exists for one purpose. Speaking English, no decision, no negotiation, just action. At first it feels unnatural. Your brain resists, but you continue. 10 minutes. That's it. And when you finish, you give yourself a reward. Not scrolling, not distraction, but recognition. You did it. Small, but real. Now the loop begins to change. Trigger new response, new reward. Repeat that enough times and your identity starts to shift. You are no longer someone who tries to learn English. You are someone who practices daily, automatically. And this is a shift everything depends on. Because fluency is not built in big moments. It is built in repeated loops, tiny actions, executed consistently. Let me ask you something. Right now, today, what loop are you reinforcing? The one that moves you forward or the one that keeps you comfortable? Because you are not stuck by accident. You are trained into your current pattern. And the moment you see that clearly, you also realize something else. You can redesign it, but only if you stop relying on awareness alone and start making a decision. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, because understanding the system without changing it is just another form of passive learning. And you've already had enough of that. So, before we go any further, let me interrupt you for a moment. Let me stop you for a second. Right now you are listening, but are you actually preparing to change anything? Or are you doing what you've always done, consuming, understanding, and then doing nothing? Be honest, because this is the exact moment where most people disappear. Not physically, mentally. They agree with everything. They nod. They think, this makes sense. And then later tonight, they go back to the same habits, same patterns, same excuses, same results. So let me ask you directly, are you going to be different, or are you just going to be informed? Because information doesn't change your life. Execution does. And what you're about to see next only works if you actually do it. Not perfectly, not intensely, but consistently. So make a quiet decision right now. Not a loud promise, not motivation, just a decision. I will test this. Not tomorrow, today. Because if you don't, this will become just another video you understood, but never used. And you already know where that leads. Now let's make this simple. You don't need more resources. You don't need more time. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a system that removes friction. A system so simple your brain doesn't resist it. Because if it feels heavy, you won't do it. If it feels complicated, you'll delay it. So everything we're about to build follows one rule: minimum resistance, maximum repetition. This is not about studying harder. This is about training smarter. And more importantly, training daily. We are going to build a solo protocol. 4 parts, each one simple, each one specific, each one designed to rewire your brain for fluency. No dependence, no waiting, no excuses, just you and the process. And before we go into the first step, understand this. You are not trying to become perfect. You are trying to become consistent, because perfection delays action. But consistency builds identity, and identity is what sustains everything. So take a breath, clear the noise, and pay attention, because this next part is where everything changes. Now we build the system, not a perfect system, not an impressive system, a system you will actually follow. Because if you don't follow it, it doesn't matter how good it is. Everything here is designed for one purpose: remove resistance, increase repetition, rewire your brain. Let's begin. Step 1, speaking. Isolated vocalization. This is where most people fail. Not because it's complicated, but because it feels uncomfortable. So they avoid it. You're not going to avoid it anymore. Here's what you do. Every single day you speak for 10 minutes. Alone, out loud, no partner, no audience, no pressure, just your voice. And you describe what you're doing in real time. Simple actions. I'm opening my laptop. I'm making coffee. I'm sitting down. I'm thinking about what to say next. It doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be continuous. That's the goal. Not perfect sentences. Not advanced vocabulary. Continuity. Because fluency is not about complexity. It's about flow. Why does this work? Because it bypasses translation. You're not sitting there thinking, how do I say this correctly? You are reacting. Immediately, this trains your brain to connect thought language directly, without the delay, without the internal translation. And that is the exact skill you need in real conversation. Now here's the resistance you will feel. This is weird. This is too basic. This is not enough. Ignore that. That voice is your ego. It wants to look good before you are ready. But real progress looks simple and repetitive and honestly a little boring. Let me ask you something. Would you rather look smart or become fluent? Because you can't do both at the beginning. So commit to this 10 minutes every day. No negotiation. Even if it's messy. Even if you pause. Even if you repeat yourself. Keep going. Because every second you stay in that discomfort, you are building something real. Step 2. Writing and listening. Structure plus pattern. Now we add clarity. Because speaking builds flow, but writing builds structure, and you need both. At the end of your day, you write 10 minutes. That's it. A small diary. What you did, what you thought, what you felt. Not for perfection, for organization. Because when you write, you slow down your thinking. You see your mistakes. You notice gaps. And that awareness improves your speaking. But we're not stopping there. After you write, you read it out loud. Slowly, clearly, again and again, until the sentences feel natural. This connects writing, speaking. Structure, flow. Now, let's add the second layer. Listening, but not how you've been doing it. You don't need more content. You need deeper repetition. Choose one short audio. 1 minute. That's it. And you repeat it again and again and again. Same audio. Multiple times. Across days. Why? Because your brain learns patterns through repetition, not variety. When you hear the same structure multiple times, your brain starts predicting it, recognizing it, internalizing it. This is how native-like patterns are built, not by watching 10 different videos, but by going deep into one. Now the mistake most people make, they get bored. They want something new. But boredom is part of the process. It means your brain is stabilizing the pattern. So instead of escaping it, stay. Repeat. Let it sink in, because this is where transformation happens. Quietly. Step 3. The 24/7 mentor. Using chat correctly. Now we remove your biggest excuse. No one to practice with. You do. You just haven't been using it correctly. ChatGPT is not just a tool. It's your practice environment, available anytime. No judgment, no pressure, no waiting. But most people use it passively. They ask questions. They read answers. That's not training. That's consumption. Here's how you use it properly. You interact. You simulate. You engage. You can say, let's have a conversation about my day. Correct me. Or act like an interviewer. Ask me questions. Or I will write. You fix my grammar and explain. Now something powerful happens. You get immediate feedback. No delay. No embarrassment. No fear. And because there's no pressure, you practice more. This removes a major psychological barrier, because one of the biggest reasons people don't speak is fear of judgment. But here, there is none. So you can make mistakes freely, and that freedom accelerates learning. Now the mistake? Using it like Google, searching, reading, closing. No interaction, no output, no progress. So change the way you use it. Turn it into a partner, not a library. Step 4. Tracking the data. Now we remove doubt. Because your mind will lie to you. It will say, I'm not improving. This isn't working. I still feel slow. And if you listen to that voice, you will quit. So we replace emotion with data. Once a week, you record your voice. 2 minutes. Speaking freely. Same topic if possible. Week after week. Then you listen. Not immediately, but after some time. And you compare. Now you see it. Small improvements. Shorter pauses. Clearer sentences. More confidence. Not dramatic, but real. And that changes everything. Because progress becomes visible, not imagined. And once you see progress, you continue. This is how you build momentum. Now let me ask you something. If you had proof that you were improving every week, would you still doubt the process? Or would you trust it? That's why tracking matters. Because consistency without feedback leads to frustration. But consistency with evidence builds belief. This is your system. Simple, repeatable, independent, no waiting, no excuses, no dependence. Just 4 parts. Speak, write, interact, track. Every day something small, not perfect, but consistent. And over time this becomes automatic. You don't think about it. You just do it. And that's when everything changes. Because you are no longer trying to learn English. You are someone who trains it daily, quietly, relentlessly. Let me ask you one more thing. Are you finally ready to stop preparing and start practicing? Because the system is now in your hands. The only question left is whether you will use it. Slow down for a moment. Don't rush past this part. Because this is where everything becomes personal. Not theory, not strategy, not systems. You, your habits, your patterns, your decisions. Let me ask you something. When you say you want to be fluent, what do you actually mean? Do you want the result? Or are you willing to live the process? Because those are 2 very different things. Most people want fluency, but they avoid the daily discomfort that creates it. They want confidence, but they avoid speaking when it feels awkward. They want progress, but they escape the repetition required to build it. So the real question is not, do you want to improve your English? The real question is, are you willing to be uncomfortable consistently? Think about your current pattern. You watch. You understand. You delay. Again and again and again. Now imagine this continues. 3 months from now, nothing changes. 6 months, still the same. 1 year, still thinking. I need more time. I need a better method. I need the right moment. But deep down, you know the truth. You need more time. You needed more action. Let me ask you directly. How many times have you said, I'll start tomorrow? And how many times did that tomorrow actually come? Be honest. Because this is not about English anymore. This is about self-respect. Do you follow through on what you say? Or do you negotiate with your own excuses? Another question. When you are alone, no one watching, no one judging, do you still do the work? Or do you default to comfort? Because that version of you, the one that exists in private, that is your real standard. Not what you say, not what you plan, what you repeat, daily, quietly, unseen. And one more question. If nothing changes, if you keep the same habits, where will your English be 1 year from now? Exactly where it is today. Or worse, lower confidence, more frustration, less belief in yourself? Think about that. Because time does not improve your skill. Repetition does. And right now you're choosing one or the other. whether you realize it or not. Here's the truth most people avoid. The world is not neutral. Your attention is being pulled constantly. Your time is being consumed quietly. Your focus is being fragmented daily. Every notification, every scroll, every distraction is training you to be reactive, to avoid effort, to seek comfort, to delay difficulty. And if you don't actively resist that, you don't stay the same. You decline, slowly, silently, because while you hesitate, someone else is practicing. While you prepare, someone else is repeating. While you wait, someone else is building. And the gap grows, not in talent, in discipline. So this is the moment, not dramatic, not emotional, clear. You don't need a new plan. You don't need more information. You already have the system. What you need is discipline, not intense discipline, not extreme discipline, simple discipline, daily discipline, the kind that doesn't ask how you feel, the kind that doesn't wait for motivation, the kind that just shows up. 10 minutes of speaking, 10 minutes of writing, a few minutes of repetition. That's it. Small actions, repeated daily. This is how you rebuild control. This is how you rewire your brain. This is how you close the gap between knowing and doing. And here's the shift you need to make. Stop trying to become fluent. Start becoming consistent. Because consistency creates identity. And identity sustains behavior. You are not someone who is trying to learn English. You are someone who trains every day, even when it's boring, even when it's slow, even when no one sees it, especially then, because that's where real change happens. In silence, without validation, without applause, just repetition. And over time, that repetition becomes automatic. That automatic behavior becomes skill, and that skill becomes confidence. Not fake confidence. Real confidence, built on proof. So don't wait. Don't prepare. Don't overthink. Start today, not later tonight. Not next week. Today, even if it's messy, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's imperfect. Because imperfect action will always beat perfect intention. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to begin. So this is your decision point. Not a big one, a simple one. Do you continue the same pattern? Or do you interrupt it right now? If you are ready to stop consuming and start building, then stay here. Subscribe, not for more information, but as a commitment to a higher standard of action. Because from this point forward, you don't just learn, you train,